Do you have any idea how many women move through their entire lives completely unaware of how extraordinarily captivating they truly are? Not captivating in the way that beauty standards define it, not captivating in the way that social media measures it with numbers and engagement. Something far more fundamental than any of that. Something that Carl Jung spent his life studying and documenting. Something that operates at a level so deep that the person carrying it is almost always the last one to recognize it in themselves. Jung made a discovery about human connection that changed the way we understand attraction entirely. He found that certain people radiate an energy, a presence, a magnetic quality that others feel in their bones, even when the person generating it remains completely blind to the effect they are having. The less you are consciously aware of this power, Jung observed, the more authentic and genuinely captivating it becomes. The moment a person begins performing their attractiveness, trying to project it deliberately, something essential in it is lost. But when it simply exists, when it flows naturally from who a person actually is at their core, it becomes something others cannot look away from and cannot easily explain. Today we are going to move through 12 Jungian signs that you are far more attractive than you have allowed yourself to believe. Some of these signs are so quiet and so subtle that you may have been dismissing them as coincidence for years. You may have explained them away, minimized them, or simply never connected them to the deeper truth they were pointing toward. But once you understand what they actually mean, once you see them through the lens of what Jung discovered about the human psyche and the invisible forces that govern our responses to one another, you will never be able to unsee it. Stay with this until the end, because sign number 9 is the one that women most consistently misread, and yet Jung considered it one of the clearest possible signals of a genuinely magnetic presence. Once you understand these insights, the way you observe your own interactions with the world around you will shift permanently. The first sign is that men become nervous in your presence. Have you noticed this happening? A man who moves through the world with total composure, who handles conversations and situations without visible difficulty, suddenly loses his footing when he is near you. He stumbles over his own words. He adjusts his clothing repeatedly without reason. He becomes oddly focused on something completely mundane, as though he needs somewhere safe to put his attention. You might have dismissed this as coincidence, or assumed he was simply having an off day, or concluded that something unrelated to you was making him uncomfortable. But Jung would look at this and identify something profound and specific taking place beneath the surface. When a man becomes nervous in your presence, it is because your authentic energy has activated what Jung called his anima, which is his inner feminine archetype. This is not a simple case of physical attraction. This is a deep psychological response to the genuine energy you embody without even trying to. His body is betraying what his conscious mind cannot fully process or control. He touches his neck, avoids holding your gaze for too long, speaks either in rapid bursts or with unusual slowness. This is not weakness on his part. It is his unconscious recognizing something in you that resonates at a frequency beyond his control. And the most important thing to understand is this: do not dim yourself in response. His discomfort is not a problem requiring your solution. It is direct evidence of your natural magnetic presence at work. The second sign is that people look at you more than once. Jung believed that certain individuals naturally embody universal archetypes that trigger what he called unconscious recognition in the people who encounter them. This is the psychological explanation for something you may have noticed happening throughout your life. People do not simply glance at you as you pass. They look, they move on, and then something draws them back for a second look. That second glance is the meaningful one. The first glance is ordinary observation. The second glance is the unconscious mind responding to something it cannot name but cannot ignore. You could be doing nothing remarkable at all. Entering a coffee shop, standing in a queue, walking through an ordinary public space, entirely absorbed in your own thoughts and completely unaware of the impression you are creating in the people around you. From Jung's perspective, what is happening in those moments is that you are emanating archetypal qualities that speak directly to the collective unconscious every human being carries. The second glance is not about your outfit or whether your appearance meets any particular standard. It is about the natural way you move through the world, the quality of energy you carry without effort, the way something in you calls to something in them at a level neither of you can consciously access or articulate. The third sign is that you underestimate yourself, yet the compliments keep coming anyway. Jung spent considerable time writing about what he called the paradox of the shadow, which is the strange and consistent human tendency to be blind to our own light, while that same light is entirely visible and impossible to miss for everyone around us. This is the psychological foundation of one of the most telling signs of natural attraction, which is receiving genuine compliments on the very days when you feel least attractive. Have you experienced this? A day when you feel your worst, when nothing is going the way you wanted, when you are certain you look tired or undone or somehow less than your usual self. And yet someone stops you to tell you there is something captivating about you today. This contradiction is not random. It reveals something profound about authentic magnetism. When you are not trying to project a particular image, when you have released the effort of performing yourself for an audience, your actual self emerges. And that self carries a radiance that people around you can feel. The gap between how you see yourself in those moments and how others perceive you is not ironic. It is the mechanism of authentic attraction. Your voice, your laugh, the way you move when you are not self-conscious, the natural quality of your attention when it is not being managed. These things create an impression that no amount of deliberate cultivation could produce more powerfully. The fourth sign is that people seek you out for reasons that seem insignificant on the surface. Jung developed his concept of synchronicity partly to describe how seemingly random encounters and trivial interactions often conceal much deeper psychological purposes operating beneath the visible surface of events. This explains a pattern you may have noticed without ever finding the right way to describe it. Someone asks you to explain something they almost certainly already understand. Someone requests a minor favor that barely requires your involvement. Someone seeks your opinion on something so trivial it barely warrants a conversation. These interactions seem casual, even pointless, but Jung would recognize them immediately for what they actually are. The conscious mind is constructing small bridges to fulfill an unconscious desire for connection. The person is not truly interested in the question or the favor. Those are simply the excuses the thinking mind invents to justify what the deeper self already wants, which is proximity to your energy. When someone consistently finds reasons to approach you, to text you, to stay near you even for matters that carry no real weight, the trivial request is only the visible surface of something much deeper. It is the tip of an attraction they may not even be fully aware of experiencing themselves. The fifth sign is that certain women criticize you without any real justification. One of Jung's most penetrating contributions to our understanding of human psychology was his framework for the shadow, which he described as the collection of qualities we deny in ourselves, but then project outward onto the people around us. This explains an experience that many women find deeply confusing and hurtful, which is receiving criticism from other women that seems entirely disconnected from anything they have actually done. Have you been looked at strangely by women you have never spoken to? Received passive, aggressive comments from someone who has no real reason to dislike you? been criticized for aspects of your appearance or personality when you were simply being yourself without any intention of provoking anyone. From Jung's perspective, this is not about you at all. When your natural presence, your authenticity, your confidence, or your effortless way of being triggers the shadow aspects of another woman, she experiences a discomfort she cannot explain or locate accurately. Your existence becomes a mirror that reflects back to her the qualities she has denied or rejected in herself. Her criticism is not truly directed at you. It is directed at those unacknowledged parts of herself that your presence has forced into her awareness. If you have ever been called too much when you were not even trying, or found yourself in the center of a competition you never entered, you were witnessing shadow projection. This unfounded criticism is one of the clearest indicators that your authentic energy carries genuine psychological power. The sixth sign is that strangers smile at you without any apparent reason. Jung identified certain involuntary expressions as universal responses to what he called archetypal recognition. When a stranger offers you an unprompted smile, one that is not preceded by a conversation or any obvious social trigger, you are watching this phenomenon happen in real time. Perhaps you have noticed this while walking down a street, standing in a shop, or sitting on public transport. A man looks at you and offers a quiet smile, not a prelude to approaching you, not an opening for conversation, simply a smile, genuine and brief, and then nothing further. In Jungian psychology, this spontaneous response is a signal that your presence has activated the archetype of wholeness in their unconscious mind. That smile is their recognition of something integrated and complete in your energy, something that resonates with their own deep and perhaps unconscious search for psychological wholeness. It is not a social performance. It cannot be faked because it emerges directly from the body as an involuntary response to what you unconsciously transmit. These smiles are not coincidences. They are silent acknowledgments of something authentic in you that the people around you can sense without knowing how to put words to it. The seventh sign is that men who are in committed relationships still find their gaze drawn to you. Jung's concept of anima projection helps explain one of the more uncomfortable and frequently misunderstood signs of genuine feminine magnetism. When a man who is clearly committed still finds himself looking at you longer than he should, this is not something you provoked intentionally, and it is absolutely not something you need to feel responsible for. From a Jungian perspective, what is happening is that your authentic feminine energy is activating unconscious forces in him that operate independently of his conscious intentions or his social commitments. You might notice it at a gathering, in a professional setting, on the street. A look that lingers slightly beyond what social convention would normally allow. The person tries to conceal it, but their unconscious response moves faster than their awareness. Jung would explain that what you are activating in that moment is an aspect of their anima, their inner feminine, that is not being fully met or expressed in their current life. This is not about physical desire in a simple sense. It is about a psychological completeness you represent to them at an unconscious level. This is not your responsibility. You are not creating these responses deliberately. It is your authentic presence, your way of moving through the world without pretense, that generates this powerful and unintended impact. The eighth sign is that you receive genuine attention on social media without doing anything designed to attract it. Jung, had he lived to observe the digital world, would have found it a fascinating landscape in which to study how authentic individuation stands out against a relentless background of performed personas. This is the deeper explanation for something you may have noticed and perhaps not been able to account for. You post something casual, no carefully planned pose, no image designed to generate a particular response, nothing revealing or constructed to optimize engagement, and yet the response it generates is significant, and genuine. From a Jungian perspective, this represents a spontaneous recognition of your individuation in a world saturated with artifice. When a woman embodies her actual self rather than a curated version of it, she does not need to perform to make an impact. What captivates people is not what is made explicitly visible, but what is transmitted through authenticity, your genuine way of seeing, your unfiltered quality of being. The irony is that you probably believe you need to try harder, show more, create something more polished. But your power lies precisely in the opposite direction. It lives in the naturalness that passes through the screen and reaches something real in the people on the other side of it. The ninth sign is one of the most commonly misread, and yet Jung considered it among the most revealing. Men become confused around you. This is the pattern where a man shows unmistakable interest, seeks you out, engages with apparent enthusiasm, and seems completely drawn to your presence, and then suddenly and without any clear explanation, pulls away. And then just as mysteriously, he returns, as though the distance never happened and no explanation is owed. Most women interpret this as indifference, as emotional immaturity, or as a deliberate game being played. But Jung would see it in an entirely different way. He called this process enantiodromia, which describes the tendency of something to transform into its opposite when it reaches a state of intensity. When a man experiences attraction to your authentic energy at a depth that exceeds what he knows how to manage, it creates a genuine inner conflict between what his conscious mind intends and what his unconscious keeps pulling him toward. His confusion is not performance. He is experiencing the real tension between opposing psychological forces. His conscious mind feels overwhelmed by the depth of connection your presence creates, while his unconscious continues its pull toward you. He creates distance not because his interest has disappeared, but because the intensity of the interest has activated his deepest psychological defenses. When the internal pressure subsides, he returns, often without full awareness of what drove either the departure or the return. If you have been reading this as lack of interest, understand that it frequently means precisely the opposite. The 10th sign is that you genuinely do not recognize your own power. Jung held the view that the conscious ego is simply not equipped to fully comprehend the true power of the integrated self. This is why the most magnetically attractive individuals so consistently doubt their own impact. They move through life questioning their worth, comparing themselves to others, wondering whether they measure up, while simultaneously creating profound impressions everywhere they go without any deliberate effort. This paradox is central to authentic attraction. From a Jungian perspective, this absence of self-recognition is not a flaw to be corrected. It is actually a feature of genuine integration. When you are not consciously trying to project an image of attractiveness, your true self surfaces naturally. And that self carries an energy that others perceive the moment they come into contact with it. It shows when you enter a room without intending to be noticed and find that you are. It shows when you speak simply, without trying to impress, and leave the strongest impression in the room. It shows in every unguarded moment where you are simply present rather than performing presence. This power does not begin when someone else validates it. It already exists, whether you have acknowledged it or not. But when you begin to accept it, not from arrogance, but from a calm and honest recognition of your inherent worth, something in your body language, your energy, and your entire presence aligns with a deeper truth about who you actually are. The 11th sign is that your absence is felt more than your presence is acknowledged. Jung introduced the concept of temenos, a term describing a sacred psychological space that is created by authentic presence and that carries its own weight and quality beyond the physical person who generates it. This explains why people feel your absence more acutely than they ever verbally acknowledged your presence. Have you noticed that when you leave a gathering, something in the atmosphere changes? That people comment on the shift without being able to explain it? That conversations take a different direction and the energy of the room feels different in some way that nobody can quite articulate? From a Jungian perspective, your integrated presence creates a kind of psychological container that holds something more than your physical self. It holds a quality of energy that influences the entire environment, often invisibly, and that only becomes fully apparent when it is removed. This lasting impression is what makes a person genuinely unforgettable. Not because they make dramatic entrances or demand attention, but because they leave an energetic absence when they go. If you have ever received a message after leaving somewhere that said the energy changed when you left, you were experiencing one of the clearest possible confirmations that your presence carries psychological weight far beyond what you are consciously projecting. The silence in your company does not feel empty. It feels alive. It carries weight, texture, emotion. It changes the atmosphere in ways that are difficult to explain logically because most people have been conditioned to believe that connection is created primarily through words. They think closeness is built through constant conversation, endless reassurance, repeated explanations, and continual verbal exchange. But some of the deepest human experiences occur beneath language entirely. Some forms of understanding emerge in spaces where speech becomes unnecessary. And this is exactly the territory Carl Jung spent much of his life trying to describe. Jung understood that human beings communicate on levels far deeper than conscious dialogue. Beneath the surface personality exists an enormous inner world made of instinct, emotion, memory, symbolism, intuition, fear, desire, and unconscious recognition. Most interactions never reach this depth. Most remain confined to social performance. People exchange information, opinions, humor, routines, and roles. They speak constantly, but very little of themselves is truly revealed. In shallow interactions, silence becomes threatening because the performance suddenly stops. Without words to maintain the structure, both people begin to feel exposed. The emptiness underneath becomes visible. Anxiety rises. Someone rushes to fill the space. But when a connection operates at a deeper level, silence transforms completely. It stops feeling like absence and begins feeling like presence. It becomes dense rather than hollow. Two people sit together and something unspoken moves quietly between them. There is no pressure to impress, no urgency to perform, no desperate attempt to maintain attention. The nervous need to constantly prove worth disappears. Instead, there is a kind of psychological resting, a calm alertness, a sense that simply existing together is enough. This is rare because most people have never learned how to truly be present. They have learned how to distract themselves, entertain others, manage impressions, and escape discomfort. But presence is something different entirely. Presence requires inner integration. It requires a person to become comfortable enough with themselves that they no longer need constant stimulation to avoid their own inner world. And that kind of stillness cannot be faked for long. Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from disconnection from the self. People spend years constructing identities designed to gain approval, avoid rejection, and survive socially. He called this constructed identity the persona. The persona is useful because it allows people to function in society, but problems begin when the persona becomes the entire identity. Then the individual loses contact with deeper aspects of the psyche. They become fragmented. Their outer life continues, but inwardly they feel restless, anxious, emotionally hungry, or strangely empty without understanding why. Because of this fragmentation, many people become uncomfortable in silence. Silence removes distractions. It interrupts performance. It creates the possibility of genuine encounter, not only with another person, but with oneself. And for someone disconnected from their inner world, that experience can feel unbearable. They need noise because noise keeps deeper feelings buried. They need constant activity because stillness threatens to reveal what has been avoided for years. But there are certain individuals whose presence creates the opposite effect. Around them, silence feels safe rather than threatening. Time slows down. Defenses soften. People stop trying so hard. Something in the nervous system begins to settle. These individuals often do not realize the effect they have because their way of being feels natural to them. Yet others feel it immediately. They feel less fragmented in their presence, less pressured, less guarded, more real. This kind of presence is not charisma in the conventional sense. Modern culture often mistakes loudness for magnetism. It celebrates people who dominate attention, project confidence aggressively, or overwhelm environments with energy. But genuine magnetic presence is often quiet. It does not force itself upon others. It draws people inward instead of overpowering them outwardly. Its strength comes not from performance but from psychological coherence. Jung believed that when a person begins integrating the unconscious aspects of themselves, something profound changes in their energy. The individual becomes more whole, less divided internally, less dependent on external validation, less reactive, less desperate to control perception. This process, which Jung called individuation, creates an unusual kind of stability. The person no longer needs every moment filled because they are no longer fleeing themselves internally. That is why silence around such people feels different. Their calm is not empty detachment, it is groundedness, and human beings instinctively recognize groundedness because so few people possess it fully. Most people are internally scattered. Their attention jumps constantly. Their emotions pull in different directions. Their sense of self changes depending on who they are around. But an integrated person creates a psychological field of consistency. Others unconsciously feel that steadiness and begin relaxing into it themselves. This is also why some people find themselves revealing deeply personal things unexpectedly in the presence of certain individuals. They do not always understand why they suddenly feel emotionally open. But the nervous system responds to authenticity before the conscious mind can explain it. When someone feels deeply present, non-judgmental, emotionally contained and inwardly stable, others sense permission to lower their defenses. Silence becomes less threatening because the space itself feels emotionally secure. Jung's idea of active imagination helps explain part of this phenomenon. Active imagination was not merely fantasy or daydreaming. It was a deliberate engagement with the unconscious through receptivity, observation, symbolic awareness, and deep psychological listening. Jung understood that the deepest truths often emerge indirectly rather than through rational analysis alone. Presence itself becomes a form of communication. Attention becomes transformative. When two people share meaningful silence, something similar happens. The interaction shifts beneath the level of ordinary conversation. Tiny details become amplified. Breathing patterns, eye contact, emotional atmosphere, body language, energetic tension, psychological openness. None of this is usually noticed consciously, yet the psyche absorbs it continuously. Two nervous systems begin communicating beneath words.